Welcome everybody to GlugNet. As usual, following our presentation, we'll have a survey to give feedback to Jason. If you complete that survey, you'll be entered to win our JetBrains drawing for this month. So without further ado, we'll turn it over to Jason Alba, who will be speaking to us tonight on managing your career. Take it away, Jason.
All right, great, thank you. So y'all can see my screen, right? I think I'm sharing it correctly.
Yes.
Normally, I love getting on a plane and coming to a room and talking to people and feeling the energy in a room and all that stuff. And this is different. This is what I call the quarantine edition or the COVID edition. So I appreciate everybody coming out tonight and sharing a couple hours this evening, and then whoever else is going to watch this on YouTube. Still the content will be relevant on YouTube after tonight. Let me do a quick introduction of some of the stuff that I'm doing and some of the things that I have to give to you, and then I'm going to go into my story a little bit and just kind of lay a foundation for why I'm so passionate about what I call career management. And then I'm going to talk about 3 or 4 specific elements of things that you can or could or should do to manage your career. So first of all, my email is jason@gibberjobber.com, and you're welcome to email me. I try to be quick on my responses, but sometimes, as you know, I get stuck in projects. I'm a little bit slow, but I tend to go through all of my emails. I've been blogging since 2006 when I started this journey of career management. I'll tell my story a little bit more in depth in a little bit, but I lost my job in January of 06, and in May I started Jibber Jobber, which is a CRM for job seekers. And a couple, 2 or 3 years later, I started creating online content for Pluralsight. And I actually have right now, if you look in my page, I have 36 courses. There's actually 35 courses, and then there's a 6-hour series for job seekers, and they count that as a course. So they say I have 36 courses. Right now, I can offer most anybody until I run out 30-day passes of Pluralsight. So if you don't have access to Pluralsight and you would like a 30-day pass, just shoot me an email, jason@gibberjobber.com. Also, I've created what I call the job search channel on Pluralsight. And so here's some examples. A lot of these are mine because that's kind of my space that I've been in for a long time, but there's some other topics that are outside of mine. So I have job search strategy, how to develop a brand, which is one thing we're going to talk about today. Informational interviews, which I think is the silver bullet in the job search. If I were to start a job search today, I would spend most of my time with an informational interview strategy. I talk about LinkedIn. That was the first book that I ever wrote, and actually the first Pluralsight course that I did. There's some courses by other people that you can see here. So how to get your first job in IT, very, very popular course by Dan Appelman called Career and Survival Strategies for Technologists. I love the way Dan thinks. So anything from him I recommend. Alan Ackman's a professional writer and communicator, so he has a course on resumes and writing and stuff like that. And then Rob Morris. And then let's see, these last 3 are mine too. Becoming a Better Listener. This is actually my most popular course on Pluralsight. I didn't think anybody would listen to it, but it's turned out to be very popular. I don't know if people think that IT professionals or developers aren't good at listening, but for whatever reason, they go and watch that course. This is actually a really good course for when you're in a job search and you need to network and communicate with people. It kind of helps your communication game. And then a couple other courses there. All right, so like I said, Jibber Jobber is a CRM for job seekers. This is simply a tool that replaces your job search spreadsheet. It's something that you can use to organize your contacts, companies, and jobs. So those are the main things. And then just like any other CRM, you can have log entries and reminders and things like that. It's just an organizational tool. My favorite users are the ones who say I landed a job and I'm keeping my Jibber Jobber account because I'm going to keep networking. So it really is a way to help you manage and organize your networking strategy over time. All right, so here's the 4 things that we're going to go into. Personal branding. The next 2 are networking, but I broke it out. One is growing your network strategically, and the other one is nurturing relationships. And then the 4th topic is income streams. I used to do this presentation called Career Management 2.0, and I'd get on the road, and I swear I've shared this presentation probably 200 times. And every time I would do it, I would actually look back at my slides, look at my agenda, and I think, okay, what's next? What's the next greatest thing in career management? What's the next thing that I should be talking about? And I'll be honest with you, it took years and years before I finally realized that there was something else to talk about. I couldn't get rid of branding. You can't talk about career management without talking about the importance and the power of having and developing and communicating your personal brand. And of course, you can't not talk about networking. You know, the statistic, there's this survey that came out in the 60s. I think it was in the 60s, which, gosh, that's almost 60 years ago now. Anyways, back then, 50, 60 years ago, the survey went out saying, how are you hiring people, or how are people finding jobs? And they found that, I think it was like 65% of people that found a job through their network. Now, a lot's changed since the 60s, right? Like, there wasn't the internet, there wasn't Amazon, there wasn't really anything that we think about as part of our daily life and critical to our daily life wasn't even around in the 60s. Along came Monster, and then Indeed and LinkedIn and all these technologies that are supposed to make things so much easier and better and faster for our life. But what I've found is networking still is a significant part of how we do job search and how we do career management. And so anyways, that's where networking comes into it. So I'm sitting there, you know, in my hotel room or the hallways of the conferences, looking at my slides, thinking, okay, how do I freshen this up? I'm getting bored. Done this presentation a couple hundred times. I've even gone back to the same places year after year and given the almost word for word the same presentation with the same stories. And I'm thinking, how do I update this? Especially when I talk to IT people, like we're always updating stuff, and I just couldn't update it. And then something really cool happened, and I realized that the update really was developing multiple streams of income. And that is a significant part of what I call career management. And so now I call this presentation Career Management 3.0, right? We have finally moved on. It took years and years, but we finally moved on from 2.0 to 3.0. So let me just share my story. I'm going to actually share 2006 story, and then I'm going to jump over to the 2018 story. So in 2006, I was working at a job, and well, actually before 2006, because it was in January that I got let go. It was Friday the 13th of January in 2006 was my last day, and I was working at this job. I had been a developer. I remember I was at a meeting, and there were some kids in there, some interns that we had from the computer science program, and we were talking about some stuff, and I was like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about at all. Like, they switched languages. The language that I was used to, that I had developed in at a different company, the methodologies, everything was just so different. And I remember sitting in that room, and I was like, I'm out. Like, I can't do this. I can't speak their language. I can't look at their code. I don't understand any of this stuff, but I can manage. Like, I can run the projects and the products and work with customers and sales and marketing and all that stuff. And that's really where my passion was anyways. I loved having a background in technology because it helped me in whiteboard meetings where the developers were like, we can't do this. And I'm like, well, why not? And then I'd get up with a marker and I'd show them how I would do it. I got that from my programming background, but I decided that I was going to manage, and so I did. And sometimes I regret that. I mean, I walked away from development. I walked away from being really deep into technology and coming up with solutions. And I enjoyed what I did on the management and the leadership side, but every day, like every hour, I was getting further and further away from being a competent technologist. So anyways, that's a little bit of a background. The company that I was a general manager for, it was handed to me, kind of. I mean, right place, right time. Circumstances were right. The main leader of the organization left, and I found myself as general manager. Well, this company that I was managing wasn't healthy. There was a lot of problems, and they mostly had to do with a very red financial statements. They were losing a lot of money, and there came a point where somebody had to get let go. And I was one of the higher paid. I didn't make a whole lot of money, but I was one of the higher paid. And the person who had left before, he was part owner, and he actually came back and positioned for his job, and I was let go because I wasn't part owner, and for whatever other political reasons I was let go. And so it was hard. It was so hard. I remember a friend of mine, probably about 3 or 4 years earlier, he told me, he said, getting laid off is worse than getting fired. And I didn't understand it. I really didn't understand what he meant. But I think what he was talking about was when you get laid off, it's not like when you get fired, it's usually because you did something stupid, right? But getting laid off comes from maybe not you, maybe other things. And so I don't know. I don't know if it's harder getting laid off or fired. I've never been fired. But I know that getting laid off has a lot to do with management, changes, bad planning, market circumstances. I'll tell you what, whether laid off or fired is harder, I don't know, but they both suck, right? Like what happened was I had 100% of my income coming in from this job. And when 3 or 4 people sat in a room and decided to lay me off, they had 100% control over 100% of my income. And so the story that I tell is a few years later. I had written a book. I started Jibber Jobber, right? So I was an entrepreneurial founder and CEO and stuff that I thought was really impressive. I wrote a book. People called me up and said, hey, come speak at my conference. We'll pay you money. The money in speaking, by the way, used to be ridiculous. I got paid about $5,000 a pop, plus expenses to go do a presentation like this on stage. And $5,000 was crazy fun money, especially for a guy who was running a startup that wasn't funded. And so anyways, I was in Virginia. I was in the Virginia, DC, Maryland area, and I had like 7 or 9 presentations. I was really, really busy, and it was just so awesome to be back in the saddle again. You know, as a professional, I would go somewhere and people are like, oh, the speaker's here. No, you're Jason Alba. Oh my gosh. And, you know, oh, you wrote this book and that's so amazing. And all these things. And that was a far cry from where I was at in my job search. So I was in Virginia for this night, and then Maryland the next morning, and Virginia the next day, and just popping back and forth across the border there. And I was on my way to my very last presentation. It was in Maryland, and I was gonna do the presentation, and I was gonna hop on a plane. And I was excited to go home. I was tired, but I was having a lot of fun. And I had this idea. I was like, look down. And it was weird because I usually don't get these like, you know, load of brick inspirations, but look down was my inspiration. And I looked down as I was on the highway, unfamiliar territory. I didn't have a GPS. Hardly anybody had GPS back at this time. I looked down and my gas gauge, the needle was below the red area on empty. And I panicked because I've been living in the West for a while, and in the West, there's not a lot of trees. And you can see miles and miles away. You can see on the highway the next 3 gas stations. Well, in this area, it was all trees, and it was windy roads, and I didn't know, I knew where I needed to go, but I didn't know where I was, and I didn't know where the next gas station was. And I know that sometimes from the highway, you jump off on an exit, and you're done. Like you could be going off into some Stephen King novel, and with no idea how you're going to end up back on the highway and back on your road. So But I had no choice. I was past empty, and I was like, okay, I'm going to pull off here, and I really hope there's a gas station close enough because I don't have much time before my presentation starts. So I pull off on the next exit, and thank goodness there was a gas station there. Pulled into the gas station, and this is one of those gas stations that you don't want to end up in. At night, during the day, you never want to end up in this gas station. It just felt scary and dangerous. There was bulletproof glass around the thing, and there was bars around the glass. It was just scary. And I remember I got out of my car, threw my credit card in, I was standing there pumping the gas, and I thought, this is exactly what I did to my career. See, in this trip, I was doing a lot of fun stuff. I was doing all the right stuff that I needed to do as a speaker. And in my career, I had done all the right stuff, quote unquote. I had done all the things that people said that I needed to do in order to have a great career, in order to have this thing that we used to call job security. Remember that? So I was sitting there at the gas station having this epiphany that I ran my career the way that I ran that trip. I was running hard. I was doing things. I was having fun, but my career gas gauge was going way down, and it went past empty. And then I got laid off, and it was past empty. I had nothing left. And when I started my job search in January of 2006, it was painful. It was hard. It actually led me into a depression. I'm not really a depressed person, but I went into a real depression, which I didn't understand at the time, but it was debilitating. It was really just, it was crazy. So I remember thinking at that gas station, never again will I do that to my career. I need to, and I vow I will manage my career. And these are the things that make up career management. So normally this is when I jump into what my tactics and my ideas and my concepts are, but I want to switch over to fast forward about 12 years later. So I've had an awesome career since I got laid off. There was a lot of lows, a lot of lows. Being an entrepreneur is fun, but it's not easy. And I chose a lot of hard paths, but somehow made it through. But anyways, I wrote a book, and then I wrote another book, and then I wrote another book, and I started traveling around mostly the US, had one international trip to Turkey. So now I could say I'm an international speaker. After a while, I started doing courses for Pluralsight, which has been an awesome opportunity. If anybody here has ever been interested in becoming a Pluralsight author, shoot me an email, jason@jibberdobber.com, or I'm sure you could talk to Joe. I have a lot of good to say about it. It's been a major blessing in my life, but a lot of good stuff has happened. Fast forward to 2018, December of 2017, I was getting to a point where I was honestly getting bored. I had kind of systematized a lot of Jibber Jobber and the processes and the customer support and all that stuff. I have a great team behind me there. It wasn't a 40-hour-a-week job anymore. It wasn't something that I needed to be there all the time for. I wasn't writing more books. I was taking a break from Pluralsight. There just wasn't a whole lot going on, and I thought, you know what? I'm gonna get a job. Like, let's do this. It's a great economy. It's a great time to do this. And so February 1st, I think it was February 1st, it was February 1st of 2018, I started a job at one of my dream companies, really. It was one of the companies local to me that I thought, if any company around here is gonna pull me out of my entrepreneurship and entice me to be an employee, it's gonna be this company. I had 2 or 3 of those companies. And so anyways, I found this job that was just bizarre. The description was pretty much everything I'd been doing since I got laid off. It was, they wanted someone who had authored books and ebooks and done radio and done podcasting and done speaking from stage and done courses and had a technology background and also had employment or HR background. And I thought, this is bizarre. I've been in this small space for a long time, and nobody that I know has done all of these things, but I have. Like this job description was written for me, and so I applied on I think on LinkedIn. I reached out on LinkedIn, and the hiring manager, who was a VP, wrote back on LinkedIn, and he said something like, "What in the world have we done right to attract someone like you?" I thought that was pretty cool, because most of my job search experience didn't get that kind of reaction. And that reaction actually came from, hold on, let me make a note here because I want to talk about something I forgot about. That reaction came from the branding that I had done over the years, right? I am a huge advocate of creating and building and communicating a personal brand. And this was the first time, one of the first times that my brand had paid off so well. And so he writes this message: "What in the world could we have done to attract someone like you?" And, you know, I was shocked, and I went to my wife and I said, "Hey, check this out. Read this. This is cool." And she's like, "Yeah, he probably says that to everybody." And I was like, "Okay, thanks a lot." Let all the air out of my sails. What I learned was he didn't say that to everybody. Long story short, I ended up working for him. He was a dream boss. He was amazing. He was the type of boss that fit very, very well with me and the way that I think. I'm very entrepreneurial. I like to be given a direction and tools and a vision and a shove, and kind of get out of my way and let me do my thing. That's what I've been doing for my whole career. And this was the perfect role for me. Well, long story short, he left after a few months. He said, "Hey, I hired you to replace me." And he had bigger fish to fry. He had other stuff, his own entrepreneurial journey that he wanted to go on. And he left, and he was like, "Jason is my replacement." Well, what I didn't know at the time was that he carried the vision of this new program that we were going to roll out. And the executive team really didn't carry that same vision. So when he was gone, and he was very persuasive, when he was gone, the vision pretty much went away. And as you can imagine, it didn't go very well for me and my team. And so the other guy that I worked with saw the writing on the wall, and he left a little bit earlier than I did. But I was just going to wait and see if there were other opportunities. Because like I said, this was a great company, and this was the kind of company that I wanted to invest my time in. And so anyways, it didn't work out that way. And in October, I think it was Halloween week, I sat down with my new boss, and she was sitting across the table from me. I don't know if any of you ever laid anybody off. It's not fun. Like I said, there's a difference between firing and laying off. But if you're firing someone, it's like, "I'm sorry, but you did this ridiculously stupid thing. This is all on you, and you're fired. Like, this is your termination, and you shouldn't have done that horrible mistake." Laying somebody off really is more of a, "I'm sorry that we don't have our act together. We shouldn't have hired you in the first place," or, you know, any of those things. Of course, people don't say that, but I think those are a lot of the thoughts that go through your mind. So anyway, she's sitting across the table from me, and she says, "You know, your last day is going to be November 30th. She gave me about 4 or 5 weeks to tie up all the loose ends and finish everything. "Your last day is November 30th. And I'm thinking, but I'm the right guy for the bus, right? You know, good to great. They talk about good to great. There's good to great posters in the hallway. And Jim Collins in Good to Great says, even if you don't have a seat on your bus, if you find the right person, you bring them on your bus anyways, and you'll make a seat for them." And I thought, I am the right person for this organization, but they didn't feel the same way. So there I am, once again, laid off, right? But here's the cool thing. I'm sitting across the table from this vice president, and or not vice president, she was an executive. And she's apologetic. When you're laying people off, you feel apologetic. And she's being apologetic, and she says, "You know, I'm really sorry, and one of the things when you lay someone off, you're typically removing 100% of their income. Remember when I said in 06, I had 100% of my income removed, right? By a handful of people. I had given people power to remove 100% of my income. When I got laid off from this dream job, dream company, I wasn't with my dream boss anymore, but I'd been with him long enough that I loved it, right? They took away less than half of my income. I had created over 50% of my income as passive income. And now when this company decided that I wasn't the right person for the bus anymore, they couldn't touch even 50% of my income. Not that they're out to take away my income, but that's what the result was back in 2006, right? Here I am in 2018. I guess that's 14 years later. Anyways, whatever the math is on that. Maybe that's why I wasn't a good programmer. Anyways, I'm sitting there in 2018 and I'm thinking, okay, no problem. I go home this time and I say, well, it's official. I mean, the writing was on the wall. We kind of knew it was going to happen, but you never know it's going to happen until it really happens. I told my wife, I said, it's official. I'm laid off and my last day is November 30th. And she went into PTSD panic mode. I mean, she didn't physically react, but I could tell that she was like, okay, okay, let's start making a list of all of the stuff that we have to do to survive. And I said, wait, hold on. We did not need that income anyways. We can still pay all our bills. We can still live up to our budget. We can actually still pay down some of our debt. We are okay. And it was awesome. The biggest financial hit from losing that job was I was on an accelerated debt payment program, personal, where I was dumping a ton of my money into debt payment. And now I was on a slow debt payment program. But that's it. They didn't hurt my family and they didn't hurt my lifestyle. And that is what became Career Management 3.0 and why I want to talk about today income streams, multiple streams of income. Let's start off with personal branding. So personal branding is a funny thing. I remember talking with people early on when I was formulating this idea, or for myself understanding what personal branding was. And a lot of people back then, back in 08, the 2007, 2008 time period, they were like, well, I'm not a cow. I don't want to be branded, right? I'm not a soda. I don't want to be branded. I'm more complex. I'm broader and deeper than something like that. And there was this stigma that if we branded ourselves, then we were, I don't know, it's like we were sellouts, right? I don't know if anybody here feels that way. So when I'm on stage, I'll say, hey, who here in this room has a personal brand? Raise your hand if you have a personal brand. And usually most people don't, I mean, I don't know if they're introverted or what, but most people don't want to raise their hand. I get about 5% of an audience that'll raise their hand and I say, okay, what's your personal brand? And I'll ask people who raise their hands and they'll tell me something. Usually it was not very good. Sometimes it was okay, but usually it was not very good. And then I said, who in this room doesn't have a personal brand? And I want you to think about this because it's probably you. Who in this room doesn't have a personal brand? And more people would raise their hands. And I said, I would call on people who raised their hands and I would say, if you had a personal brand, what would it be? And it was interesting because most people would be like, well, I just said I don't have a personal brand, but I let the silence kind of do its job. If you had a personal brand, what would it be? And everybody answered that question. Those answers were actually better than the people who said they had a brand and shared what their brand was. So my question to you, and I'd love for you to write this down, if you had a brand, what would it be? By the way, I got that question. I was listening to a parenting podcast or radio, or I don't remember. Maybe it was a CD. And somebody was talking about when they're talking with their kids, and you ask this kind of a hard question. I don't remember what it was, but you ask a hard question to your kids, and they're like, "I don't know." And this parent psychologist said, when they say "I don't know," say, "If you did know, what would it be?" And I was like, "Oh, that's brilliant," because then they're going to tell you the truth. And so, anyways, that's my question for you. If you had a brand, what would it be? All right, pause on that idea. Let's go to Pepperdine. So I was speaking at Pepperdine one day. It was a MBA class, and I went in early. I was on at 2:00, and I went in early in the morning to watch all the presentations. I wanted to see what the other presentations were about. I didn't get an agenda. I didn't know who was speaking. I didn't know what they were on, and I wanted to make sure that my presentation went in really well, fit in really well with what the other speakers were talking about. So right before lunch, this lady gets up and she does this hour and a half presentation, and it was awesome. It was really cool, except it was my presentation. Like, she did everything that I was going to do. And I was like, holy cow, I have like 1 hour to change my presentation so it doesn't mimic what hers was. Anyways, I'm standing at the back of the room by the door as students, these very, very smart MBA candidates, are walking out the door, and I'm just thinking about one of the speakers there was the guy from Tom's, the founder of Tom's, the shoe line. It was brilliant. It was in his early days. It was really cool. But anyways, I'm at the back of the door, and people are walking out, and this guy and gal are walking out, and the girl, I think it was the guy, he said, "I still don't get it. I don't understand what personal branding is." And this is a question that I'd heard in my presentations across the country after I talk about personal branding for an hour, and people are like, "I still don't understand what personal branding is." And so I had a little bit of time to think about it. I get up on stage at 2:00 and I address that issue. I might have even said that I, overheard somebody say that, but here's my concise definition of personal branding. I think this is really powerful. Write this down. Your brand is how others perceive you. That's what your brand is. And it makes sense, right? How others perceive you. So I think that if you and I were to sit down, if I were coaching you, and I don't do coaching, but if I were coaching you and I would ask you what you want your brand to be or what your brand should be, you'll give me these cool ideas. And some of the ideas will be jargon, that maybe the guy sitting next to you will understand, but other people outside of, like, you go to a family reunion or something and people there have no idea what you do. You're just the geek or the nerd or whatever. So we can think about what we want our brand to be, and we can define what we want our brand to be, but our brand is how others perceive us. So the question becomes, how do we want others to perceive us, right? So that goes back to what you think you want your brand to be, and how can we communicate that in a way that others actually perceive us that way, one, and two, that's how they actually talk about us. There's so much power in personal branding, but a good, solid personal brand doesn't just happen, okay? So if I were in a meeting with 50 or 100 people, I would invite 2 people up to stand on either side of me. One would be an older person, let's call them a baby boomer, and the other would be a younger person, let's call them a millennial, although millennials are kind of aging. They're actually starting to get gray hairs, you know what I mean? So let's go with Gen Y. So we're going to get this really brilliant, smart Gen Y person on one side, and they're excited and they're wet behind the ears, and then we're going to get a baby boomer on the other side, and I say, all right, you guys don't know the audience, you guys don't know these two people, you don't know their names, you don't know what they do, you don't know what they want, but I want you to tell me about them. This person represents baby boomers, and this person represents Gen Y. Tell me about them. And we could do this for an hour. We could go a solid hour. And so people will say, well, the baby boomers, they're not good with technology. They don't understand technology. And my answer to that is, hey, just because somebody could play video games all day long doesn't mean they're a technologist, right? I'd love to get someone who thinks they're good at technology because they're good with cell phones and video games. Give them like a programming or a database or any real technical project, right? So baby boomers are expensive. They have health issues. They're not very flexible. Like, they're at a certain place in their career. They want to come in at 8 and be gone by 5. Whereas a Gen Y, they're like in it. Like, if you hired them, and I'm not talking about the low-level, fast food workers. I'm talking about someone who's a professional, just on fire to have an amazing career. They'll work past 5. They'll work past 6. I mean, they live in their parents' basement, right? So it doesn't matter how long they work. They can work till 10 or 11 at night. The only thing they have that they might miss is gaming with their friends, right? So anyways, we go on this exercise, and there's all these stereotypes coming in. Baby boomers are more expensive because they have healthcare needs that are more expensive, and it makes our insurance rates go up. Gen Y is less expensive because their salaries are kind of starting off salaries, and the baby boomer needs a lot higher salary. And we go on and on into these stereotypes, and it's funny and people laugh, but it's also uncomfortable because we go into some taboos. We go into some areas that you're not supposed to talk about in our society, but they're real, right? And so we get into this situation where we are inheriting characteristics from stereotypes. This is what happens when we allow a brand to happen. And I talk about how we can inherit characteristics of stereotypes from generations, right? The ages that we just talked about. We can inherit characteristics of stereotypes from where did you go to school? Did you go to the local community college, or did you go to that really cool high-tech, not high-tech, but the college, the university that pumps a lot of CS people out, right? You can inherit characteristics of stereotypes of where you're from, which could come from your accent, right? I remember in college there was like an organizational behavior class, and we were watching this video about accents in the United States, and the person from the South with the Southern drawl. It's charming, and it's fun for like hanging out or catching crawdads or country music. But if I am in a high pace, I don't imagine that Southern drawl and on Wall Street, right? And then you got someone from like a Brooklyn accent, a really tough, like they could be really nice people, but every time they say something, it feels like they're going to punch you in the face, right? And they're probably not the person you would put on customer support. This was this fascinating documentary on accents. Well, I just gave you 2 stereotypes that impact people's careers based on how they talk. Should we say that nobody from Brooklyn should ever be in customer support? Now, if you're from Brooklyn and you tell me that they should never be in customer support, that's different. But when we start basing career decisions on characteristics from stereotypes, that's not fun, right? Not even to mention any of the common stereotypes that we face, okay? So let me tell you a story about a friend of mine. His name is Mike. and I'm pretty sure he's retired now. I met him back in '06 online first, and then I actually went down to Houston and had lunch with him. Mike, when I met him, was an old man, and he looked old, and he had gray hair, thinning. Actually, it was almost white, right? So almost white, thinning. He was a wrinkly guy, super nice guy, really, really cool guy. And Mike was a CIO of big companies. Like, he wasn't CIO like my level. He was CIO of multi-billion-dollar organizations. Mike was facing, if you can imagine, age discrimination. But he is, for me, the poster child of how to combat age discrimination. This was one of the coolest stories that I ever saw. So Mike could go into an interview and you see him and you're like, nope, not that guy. He's not the right guy. He's too old. There's no way. Like, maybe if we were running on a bunch of old IBM stuff, he could be the CIO for our old organization. But man, we're Web 2.0, right? That was back in '06. Whatever the new Web 2.0 is of today, for sure, you would look at Mike and say, there's no way that this old guy knows new technology. Stereotyping, inheriting characteristics. Mike was brilliant. What he did was he started a blog. And his blog, let me pause real quick. If you've ever been in the hiring process, either as a hiring manager, if you've been a hiring manager, let's say you're looking at 100 resumes and you narrow them down to 12, and then you narrow that down to 5, and you bring 5 people in. You know what? Those 5 resumes look the same. There's not anything that really jumps out as different, okay? You bring those 5 people in for interviews, and at the end of the day, you're like, they're all awesome. They all look the same. They're all great, right? They all kind of blend in together. So on the job seeker side, and if you've ever had to make a resume or a CV, you know how frustrating this is. You know, the advice of like, well, you can't have 2 pages, but, well, maybe you could have 2 pages, but you can't have 3 pages. So you keep it at 2 pages, and it has to be with this format, it has to be with this content. And I remember when I first started doing my resume in 2006 when I was desperate, and I was like, but there's so much more that I want to tell. My resume doesn't tell the whole story. My 30 or 45-minute interview with you doesn't tell the whole story. My LinkedIn profile doesn't paint the whole picture. And it was so frustrating. Well, Mike found the loophole with a blog. And here's why that's awesome. Let me back up here a little bit. So with your resume, you have this very narrow format and expectation of what you can put in to tell your story. But in a blog, you have the ability to do what I call communicate your breadth. Okay, so think about Mike as a CIO. He needed to communicate that he had leadership, vision, operations, safety, technology, right? All of the different things that go into his role. And hopefully, as you're listening to me, think about your breadth or the breadth that makes you excellent. So I'm just imagining that everybody here is a developer, okay? So I need you to be able to be excellent at this and this and this. Actually, let me take excellent out. I need you to have understanding and proficiency in each of these different areas. This is your breadth. And it's really hard to communicate your breadth in your resume. If you've ever tried to, you know how frustrating it is, because it's almost like you have a little bit of stuff to fill in a form, but there's more that you want to fill in, right? The other part of that is you could start filling in your depth. Okay, so let's say you're excellent at developing APIs. You are the API guru. Nobody in your network or your company knows APIs as well as you do, and you have a sufficient amount of depth in mobile development, right? Think about your breadth and how proficient you are in each of those different things, okay? So where you can't communicate that with any of the tools that I've said except your blog, you can use your blog to do that. How do you do that? Well, Mike wrote an article about creating vision. So he kind of stuck something up saying, I'm adding this to my breadth. And then he could write another post about something technical, and he could write something about security, and he could write something about working with others, and he can write about delegating, and he can write about any of the things that constitute his breadth. And if he wanted to, and he did, he would take a topic that he was really hot on, and he would drill down on that in multiple blog posts. So he could say, if he wanted to really be known as a CIO with a security emphasis, he could write about security things more often than not. Okay, he did awesome. He actually ended up writing a column for Forbes, and I don't remember. I know he guest wrote on other places, but he ended up this thinning, white-haired man who was old and should have been pushed out because of age discrimination, was in high demand and landed an awesome executive CIO role at a multi-billion-dollar organization. He combated discrimination. His was age discrimination. He combated age discrimination head on with the awesome branding tool. Now, I used to be a major advocate of blogging. I told everybody, write a blog. It's done wonders for me. It did wonders for Mike. I've seen it do wonders for other people. And most people are like, no, I don't like blogging. I don't like writing. I don't want to commit to it. And so just a couple of quick points on that. I would say you only have to write 12, 24 blog posts. You don't have to write that much. You can write once a month, especially if you're not looking for a job. I don't care how often you write, but you really don't have to have a ton of blog posts to create that perception or that foundation of breadth and depth. Okay, so I invite you to think about how you can build and communicate your personal brand and change how others perceive you. What if nobody reads your blog? No problem. Doesn't matter. Because when it's the right time and the right person, and they come across your blog and they're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that Joe knew this and this and this and this and this. And oh my gosh, here's a bunch of articles. He's really passionate about this stuff. I can read his passion and his expertise from his blog posts. Like I said, you only have to have a dozen or a couple dozen. You can write more. I found it to be addicting. You can write more. This isn't like this major marketing thing you're doing, but you're creating that breadth and depth that people aren't going to get other ways. Okay, that's personal branding. In a nutshell, there's more in Pluralsight. Like I said, I gave you a 30-day pass. Just shoot me an email, jason@chipperjobber.com. Joe might have some 30-day passes also. I'm happy to share that with you. I have a course called Developing a Killer Personal Brand. And then the course that I'm redoing right now, where I go into personal branding for quite a bit, about 45 minutes, it's called Career Management 2.0. So let's pause here real quick and see if anybody has any questions. I don't know if there's a moderator that calls people out, but if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to jump into those on personal branding. And then we will jump into the networking and income streams to get to the top of the hour. See my little chat window here. Okay.
Jason, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
With regards to personal branding, as far as your blog, what can you say about the naming of the blog? What must it be? What must it not be as far as the URL
Yeah.
itself?
That's a great question. I like the idea of doing your name because for guys, that typically doesn't change. For women, that could change, although it doesn't always change. I remember in the early days, I mean, I started blogging before all the social stuff happened, so blogging was the place to go. Blogging was a really big deal back in '06. Seth Godin, who's a really popular blogger, his blog was sethgodin.typepad.com, or it might have been seth.typepad.com. And I remember he talked about regretting that because when everybody linked to sethgodin.typepad.com, but he wanted to migrate to something else, right? And so the lesson that I got from that is you probably should own your own domain. It only costs like 10 or 20 bucks a year to own your own domain. If you don't have a blog to point it to, then point it to your LinkedIn profile or your GitHub, profile or whatever. You can point, you guys can change that whenever you want to whatever you want. I personally like WordPress as a platform. I have a few blogs on WordPress. I'll change the names of those if I need to, but I haven't since 2006. If you know you're going to be in technology and you know what you want your brand to be and you're really settled on that for the rest of your career, then maybe go with something like that as a domain name. The technology and the platform and where you point it to later doesn't really matter as much. But to answer your question, I would definitely figure out kind of what your name would be and grab that domain name so that wherever you post stuff, even if you just post stuff on LinkedIn articles, okay, which could be your blog platform, even if that's what you use, you can point your stuff to wherever you want it to go. My first preference is name. I have a friend who in Minneapolis, he goes by, his brand is Marketing Manly Products. It's what he's done his whole career. He markets stuff that men buy. I have another friend who is, what is it? It's Redneck Telecom or Redneck Tele something. He does sales for telecom systems and he's total cowboy. And so his brand is Redneck something techie. I can't remember what it is right now. Those I think would be fine as far as your brand. They're different, right? Everybody in the Minneapolis area, or a lot of people know this guy who's marketing Manly Products. But it doesn't have to be clever. It doesn't have to be jargony. It doesn't have to be cliche. You can do something very simple. So it could be something like Michigan Programmer or .NET Michigan, I mean, it doesn't have to be amazing, but it can. So that's how I'll answer that.
As a follow-up to that, like some of the more common names, like, if my name was John Smith, for example, obviously johnsmith.com is more than likely taken. How do you feel about johnsmith.dev versus johnsmith.blog? And doing a quick search, I found that some of them, they say that it's not optimal for search engine optimization. What's your take on that?
Well, I mean, really, so once you get johnsmith.dev, I don't like .net. Like that .net was always the one where if you can't get the .com, then get the .net. But there's some cool domain names or whatever. I don't remember what they're called right now. It's been a long day and it's been a long time since I've done this. But .dev is pretty cool. I like that. I think that would be good to have on a business card or in your email signature or whatever. As far as the SEO, I'm not doing this so people can find me by my name. They're typically finding me by the stuff I write about, right? And so I'm much more interested in the SEO that comes out of the titles of my blog posts than I am on the SEO that I'm going to get from, excuse me, than from my domain name, right? So I remember somebody, when I first started Jibber Jobber, somebody was like, oh, it's a horrible name. Like, it doesn't mean anything and nobody knows what it is. And I was like, well, what does Yahoo mean? And what does Google mean? And what does Amazon mean? And eBay? Like, they mean things now, but when they first started out, they were probably horrible too. So the branding wasn't based on the name. The name definitely is well branded now, but there's other ways to get that branding. And I would say focus a lot more on content. And if you're serious about this and SEO, content and consistency, I think are more important than what your actual name is.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Sam. Okay, I don't see any other questions coming in, so I'm going to give you 3 seconds. Otherwise, you're going to have to go to some Pluralsight courses. Okay, let's talk about growing your network. So I'm an introvert. My wife argues that. She says I am not an introvert, but I am. I like to recharge by myself. I remember one time I was invited to a conference to speak. It wasn't my people. This wasn't who I normally spoke to. It was a bunch of PR, marketing people, but it was in my hometown that I grew up in, and it was super cool to get an invitation to go back there and get into a hotel and spend a few days. And I walked around my old stomping grounds, and it was awesome. Anyways, the guy that invited me, we were roommates at this conference. We shared a room, and he called me up at about 7:30, maybe 8 o'clock, and he's like, "Dude, where are you?" This total party guy. He's like, "Where are you, man?" And I'm like, I'm in the hotel room working. I was in bed. I was in my pajamas. I was done. Like 8 o'clock at night, you know, and everybody's doing their happy hour stuff and networking, and it's just not my thing, you know. And he's like, "Hey, let's go out. We're gonna go have sushi. I got a bunch of people together." And I was like, "Okay." So I went out, but that's me. I would rather sit in my hotel room and catch up on work than hang out with a bunch of people that I really would never interface with again in my life. I like people. I like one-on-ones, but I don't like the big crowds that seem very superficial. And so anyways, I started in my job search, and you're supposed to network, right? That's what they say. I'm the they, because I said that about an hour ago. You're supposed to network. And so I'd go to these network events, and it was really miserable, honestly. Like when I was there, it was okay, but I dreaded going. When I got home, I needed to just detox and just relax by myself. I had a bad perception. Oh, sorry. I recommend 2 books. The first book is on branding, and so we ended that a few minutes ago, but let me go back in there. The first book that I'm going to recommend is called Brag, B-R-A-G, by Peggy Klaus, K-L-A-U-S. And this book was a massive eye-opener for me. It helped me understand that it was okay to talk about myself. It gave me permission to talk about myself. And there was, of course, a bunch of tactics and ideas. So aside from Brag by Peggy Klaus, let's jump back over to networking. There's a book that I picked up, and I say that I read this slow and fast at the same time. I read it slow because everything in there was just so amazing. The epiphanies and the ahas were dripping off of every page. But I read it fast because I couldn't wait to get to the next idea. And so it was the only book I can ever think of that I read slow and fast at the same time. The book was called Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi. And this was a brilliant book. I can't network with Keith. He only networks with like rich and famous people. I've tried to, but there's like a bunch of layers of people before you can actually get to Keith. But he talks about networking, and it's a brilliant book. He has brilliant concepts, and it really helped me understand what networking was, because I misunderstood it. I thought I had to go to networking events. I had to shake hands. I had to pass business cards. I had to collect business cards. I had to follow up with people. And this whole thing that I thought was networking was not efficient. It was not effective. I mean, it kind of allowed me to go back at the end of the day and say, okay, I networked. I did the right things in my job search, but it wasn't getting me anywhere. And I got a little bit of value out of it, but I didn't get the value that I should have gotten out of it. Keith Ferrazzi's book changed everything. So I don't know if y'all have ever been to a job club, but typically you go in, it's kind of like an AA meeting. You know, everybody's really happy to be there, but they're not happy. Nobody's happy to be there. Nobody wants to be there, but you're feeling good about being there, right? Like you have to put on an air that you're okay. So you go to a job club and you're shaking hands with a bunch of people who are smiling, and then people do their 30-second elevator pitches, and then a speaker comes on, and then afterwards there's networking. And so what I would do is I would come late because I didn't want to network. I thought, well, job seekers were a bunch of losers, honestly, which is stupid because I was a job seeker. But I was like, these people are broken. There's something wrong with these people. That's why they're in this room. And I can't think too much about that because I'm in the room too, and there's probably something wrong with me, but I'm not going to go there. That was my mentality going into these meetings. So I'd go late because I didn't want to network with a bunch of broken people that couldn't get a job. And I'd listen to the speaker, who usually wasn't that good. You can tell I was kind of a jerk back in the olden days. And then as soon as the speaker was done, bam, I was out of there. I didn't want to network with you. I didn't want to talk with you. I had places to be, which usually meant going home and looking at Monster to see if anybody had, you know, posted a new job in the 2 hours that I was gone. So I read Keith Ferrazzi's book, and I started to understand that my mistake was that I was going to get. I needed to receive. I was there saying, what's in it for me? And I wasn't giving nothing. I didn't think I had anything to give. I mean, I couldn't take you to lunch because I didn't have a job. I didn't have income. I didn't feel good about taking you to lunch and not taking my wife to lunch, you know? And so as I was having this epiphany and this change of thinking, I thought, I'm going to go to these job clubs and give. And there's one thing I can give. I don't have really like leads, although there was this one time I went in for a product manager interview, and it was awesome, and it was my job to have. It was a very warm lead into this role, but there was somebody that I met at the job club that week before, and I thought this person would be perfect for this job. And I went back to that person and I said, dude, you've got to interview at this company. And he did, and he got the job. That was actually pretty cool. I had started Jibber Jobber by then, so I really wasn't interested in getting a job. But it was cool to give. I didn't have those often. I was like, that's the only one I could think of. But what I did have was introductions. I could make introductions. And so when I would now go early to the job clubs, I was usually one of the first people there. And I wanted to meet you as you came in, and I wanted to hear what your 30-second pitch was, even though it was horrible. I wanted to learn about what you did and what you were looking for, and I would take notes, and I would think, who should I introduce this person to? And as soon as I could, I would say, I have a few people that I'm going to introduce you to. I need your email address. That's who I became. I could not wait for the speaker to shut up and move on so we could go back into the networking thing after the speaker was done. I did a 180, right? I no longer cared about receiving or getting. I went with a mission to give. I went with a mission to make introductions and connect people. And I didn't realize what I was doing, but I was becoming the connector of the job club. It was awesome. It was fun. It was fulfilling. I totally switched this negative personality that I had, and I started giving. And I gave freely, right? What happened was people started noticing who I was, and they started also giving back to me, and it was awesome. My networking, my idea of what networking was completely changed. That was one thing I got out of Keith's book. The other thing I got out of Keith's book, Never Eat Alone, was the permission to network one-on-one. So no longer did I feel this need to go to a big group and pass a lot of business cards and get a lot of business cards. I now understood that networking was also about one-on-one individual relationships. And that's when I started going to lunch with people. And the relationships that I started over those lunches have been long lasting, even to today. What are we, 14 years later? Some of those relationships continue today, because instead of staying at a superficial, how are you? How's it going? We should go to lunch sometime. What are you doing? What's new? All those superficial things that I kind of thought was networking, I was able to drill down really deep on a relationship with a single person and really understand who they were and how I could help them, and maybe how they could help me also. When I have those two epiphanies of giving and individual relationships, everything changed. And it fit me as an introvert. As an introvert, I don't hate people. I don't even dislike being around people, but I would much rather be with one person over lunch, or two people, or three, that's fine. I would rather be in that situation than be in a room with 100 people milling around, right? It's kind of funny. I'm going to stereotype here. I've been to a few networking events with Pluralsight, with Pluralsight authors. I think there's over 1,000 authors, and some of them are very loud and boisterous and fun and extroverted, but generally, if I can stereotype, they're programmers, and programmers are typically not your boisterous, extravagant, extroverted people. And so it's always funny to me to think about going to a Pluralsight event where you have like 50 or 100 or a couple hundred authors in a room, and we're all like, we've done great things in our career, but we're all a bunch of introverts, So anyways, those are two of the things that I learned. So let me break this down on your screen. You see the grow network and the nurture relationships. So grow network came from a problem that started in LinkedIn years ago. My first book is on LinkedIn, and don't buy it. Please don't buy it. It's years and years outdated. And it wasn't that good to begin with. But it got me into speaking gigs, and it started to develop my brand and who I was, right? So on LinkedIn back in the 06, 07, 08 time period, there was this big debate. Should I get a network based on quality, people that I know and trust, which was what LinkedIn told us to do, or should I get a big network based on quantity? And there was even an acronym called LION, LinkedIn Open Networker. And these were the people who said, I don't care who you are. If you invite me to connect, I'll connect with you. And then there was people who would brag about having, tens of thousands of LinkedIn first degree contacts. They didn't know any of them. They didn't have any relationship with any of them, but there actually was value in having that strategy. So it was a Q versus QVQ, the quantity versus quality debate, and which was better. After listening and thinking about and writing about networking and relationships and growing your network, I realized that I want to grow my network strategically. Okay, so there's two parts to that. If you come to me and say, I want to be in your network, I want to go to lunch, I want to have a conversation, whatever, I'm really usually quite open to that. Unless I can tell you're a spammer or you're just way out in left field, but generally I'm going to be open to that. Now, I've been on stage a lot. I've written, for like AOL, I've written for some big publications. I've been around the world. I've done a lot of webinars. So a lot more people have heard or read me and heard and seen my ideas than I've heard and seen theirs. And so in my position, I just feel like it's more appropriate to be open to people who come to me. Now, and that's my strategy on that side, on the intake side. When I talk about growing my network strategically outbound, I'm proactively looking for the right people to have a network relationship with. And that is not everybody, okay? So I've defined this word space. You've heard of space. And I say that people are in your space if they are in 3 particular areas. One is your profession. So if there are other .NET developers, they're in your space. Actually, you could even say if anybody's a programmer, they're in your space. That's up to you. You get to define your space, but profession, and usually you think of job titles. The next one is industry. And I know in technology, we can go to whatever industry we want. I'm not talking about technology as an industry. I'm talking about like automobiles or music or, you know, logistics or whatever those industries are. If you specialize in a certain industry, then you're going to want to connect with other people in your industry, even if they're not in your profession. Even if they're not on the dev side or in technology, but if you find somebody in marketing or an executive or whoever in your industry, they might be a great contact. They might be relevant to you. They might be in your space. Okay, so we have profession and or industry, and the third one is geography. So this is where you look for people who are in your geography. Now, a lot of times we network with people that are around us, you know, maybe in the next 10 miles or 20 or 30 miles. But in today's world, our geography might be defined by where we are and where our headquarters is, or where we are and where we want to live in the future, or where we are and where we want to market our stuff to, right? And so, for example, for Jibber Jobber, most of the users are in the United States, and so that's relevant geography to me, okay? So when we grow our network, I want to grow my network strategically based on my space, and my space is my profession and or industry and or geography. And if I find somebody who is in my profession and industry and geography, I definitely want to have them in my network. Now, we talked about LinkedIn a little bit. Just whether you're connected with me on LinkedIn or not, you could still be in my network. You might be in my LinkedIn network, but not in my real network, right? So when I talk about networking, I'm not just talking about, are we connected on LinkedIn? I'm literally talking about, can I eventually get to the point where I call you up and say, hey, I need a favor, or hey, can you make an introduction, or hey, how are things going? We haven't talked for a while. I want to get updated on what's new in your world, right? That's the kind of network that I want to create. Do I have to have numbers? No. People come to me and say, Jason, I have 4,000 people in my network. Isn't that impressive? Well, not really. First, to impress me, I want to know how many of them are relevant to you, okay? So that's what I talk about when I'm talking about growing your network. If you're going to do it proactively and strategically, grow your network with people who are in your space. Okay, nurturing relationships, very simple concept. In Jibber Jobber, let me back up. In Never Eat Alone, Keith Ferrazzi says that networking is more than just having like a little black book with names and phone numbers. That's not networking, right? Writing people down is not networking. I want to know where my relationship is with each of these people. I want to know the strength of my relationship. So when I read that, I thought, okay, in my CRM, and I'm sure other CRMs do this, but in my Jibber Jobber, I want to give you the ability to say, this is a new relationship. They are a one-star contact. There's room for growth, but I just haven't had any conversations with them. This is not somebody that I can call up and say, hey, I got this problem. Can I spend 30 minutes with you? Like, I need your help on this. As you and I have multiple touch points, which could be emails, they could be lunches, they could be seeing each other at conferences, you know, whatever it is, however it is that I nurture my relationship with you. As I nurture my relationship with you through touch points, I'm going to go in and say, hey, we're now a two-star contact. we're a 3-star, we're a 4-star, and then 5-star in Jibber Jobber is the ultimate. That's where we have a really strong professional relationship. So I want you to focus on developing those professional relationships. When I got my job at the company back in 2018, it did not come through my networking. It came through a job board, which is so funny because I've been talking about networking and networking in for years and years, and then I got a job because I applied online, but I also had a very strong personal brand, right? I'm guessing a lot of you on this call have gotten jobs before because of your network. And this can happen as a part of proactive career management, right? Think about standing at the gas station, pumping up your gas tank thinking, I will never let my gas tank, my career management tank go empty again. This is how we do it. We do it through developing networking relationships with people who are in our space and nurturing those from a 1-star to a 5-star relationship. All right, let me take a quick pause here and see if there's any questions about networking. I'll jump over to the chat window. Yeah, Sam says user groups is one of the most underrated networking opportunities. I absolutely agree. I've been to a lot of user groups over the years. I've spoken at them, and there's some awesome networking. The level of giving that I've seen in user groups is really high. It's exceptionally high. So I definitely encourage you to participate more and to give and find opportunities to give and create a user group that's really powerful. You might give and give and give and feel satisfaction from giving, but not really get any career benefit out of it until your company goes away, right? And everybody gets laid off. As I say, you get Enroned. So you're giving and building and creating this thing, and then all of a sudden your company gets Enroned, and you're the one who is in need. And you have been, over time, Keith Ferrazzi talks about, as you network, you're putting your, you're making deposits of relationship capital into a relationship bank, right? And one day you're going to be able to draw those deposits out. And you might be doing a lot of network giving right now, but one day you're going to be in a situation where I was in 2006, desperate, with months and months of no contact from anybody, and your network that you've been building and these user groups that you've been investing in and building up will come back and help you. So yeah, good comment, Sam. Thank you. All right, I don't see that anybody is unmuted, and so we will put this idea of networking to rest. We'll jump over to one of my absolute, hands down, most favorite topics, developing multiple income streams. Actually, let me segue, or not segue, but let me backspace just a little bit here. There's a blog post that I wrote called Substantiate Yourself. It's one of my most favorite concepts. I don't know if the blog post was written as well as I could have, but the concept is so powerful. So back in 2006, I lost my job, and in February, I came up with the idea for Jibber Jobber. March, April, May. In March, I hired my developer. In May, we launched. I had started networking in January, and I would go to these places and meet with these people, and they knew what I was looking for, and because I wasn't a giver, I was a getter, so I'd make sure everybody knew how they could help me. And you know, I had a lot of nice people who were nice and stuff, but I didn't have any offers. I didn't get into any interviews, right? So Jibber Jobber launches on May 15th. It was a Saturday, and I was so anxious I couldn't handle it, so I went camping. I'm like, I'm getting away from technology. And so anyways, Monday or Tuesday, a guy named Steve calls me up and he says, he actually got me up out of a nap because I was getting up at about 4 or 5 in the morning. I'm not a morning person, but I was so anxious about my new company that I was just at 4 o'clock, my eyes pop open and I'm like, all right, I'm ready to go to work. So I was downstairs in my basement and I worked since 4 o'clock till whatever. And I was taking a nap, and around 10 o'clock, Steve calls me up and he's like, hey, saw Jibber Jobber, looks awesome. I'm working on some stuff and I want you to work for me. And I was like, are you kidding me? I didn't say this, but I was like, dude, the last 5 months I've been waiting for you to say that. And now you're offering me a job like on your team. And I really would have loved to work with him. I think he was a brilliant person. I thought a lot about that. Why did I get that offer? I actually started that first month or two, started getting interviews and offers, and I didn't want any of them because by this time I was starstruck with being an entrepreneur. I didn't realize how hard it was going to be, but I started getting traction, and I was like, what is going on? Why am I getting traction now? And I realized that it was because people finally could see what I was capable of doing. What Steve saw was that I was capable of coming up with an idea and doing all the product management stuff to conceptualize and spec it out and hire a team and manage the team and successfully get a real web app that was very functional. Like a CRM is nothing to sneeze at, right? Like this is a big deal. And we built it from scratch, and it was impressive to the point where Steve was like, I want this guy on my team because I can see what he's done. A lot of people can talk, but he saw that Jason Alba could actually get it done. And that was the origin of my blog post called Substantiate Yourself. That was where I learned that when we can show people what we do, right? When we can prove to them, not telling them, but we can show them, giving them something tangible that they were like, ah. So let me tell you a funny story. Years earlier, I was working at this really awesome company. I was an intern and I was a developer. I was working on an intranet on a team, which was really fun. And there was another intern that sat in my cubicle. We had an oversized cubicle, so it was me and him. And he was a graphics artist, and he was brilliant. He was so good. And if you've ever worked with a brilliant graphics artist, you know how fun it is. And funny story, he is colorblind. So he would actually sneak his dad into the office at night and say, all right, Dad, what color is this? Tell me what color this is. And he'd go through this whole thing with his dad to make sure he was doing the right colors. Anyways, so I got this opportunity, which turned into my next job. And this guy came in with permission. He was a CFO at the company where I was going to go work. But he came in, and my boss gave us permission for him to come in and look at my stuff. Like he could come in and look at my internet projects that I've been working on. And he was exceptionally impressed. He was so impressed. And he was like, man, this is beautiful. Like I love the white background, and I love all the colors and all this stuff. This was back in, oh man, was this like 2000? It was somewhere around 2000, I think. So maybe 2006. Anyways, I went to his office later on, as part of the interview process. And I noticed as I was walking by everybody's desks, they were on dumb terminals running off of AS400. You guys have seen AS400 stuff, right? It was green screen. It was black screen with green text. There was no graphics. And this guy came into my office and looked at my functional working intranet stuff, and he was completely wowed and impressed by how beautiful it was. I take no credit for that. It was the graphics artist who did all the beautiful stuff. But through that, my work was substantiated. I could tell him that I did good stuff. I could tell him that my stuff worked eventually. I could tell him all this stuff, right? But it was him seeing my stuff. This is the power and the beauty of developing a portfolio. And I hope that you guys are working on your portfolios, whatever that means, right? It could mean that, you know, in my case, I worked at the FBI before that, and then I worked on an intranet. So a lot of my stuff was behind the scenes that nobody would ever be able to see. How do you develop a portfolio out of that? I don't want to sound like a broken record player, but guess what? You can actually write blog posts about parts of what you're developing. You don't have to let anything confidential out of the bag. You don't have to let anything proprietary out. It could all be private stuff, right? But you could say, I'm working on this proprietary app. I can't talk much about it, but there's this one particular thing that I want to talk about, authentication. And you can talk about some of the really interesting aspects of authentication that you figured out or worked through or worked on or whatever. I don't know if that's a great example, because that's, now we're getting into security and stuff like that. But you get my point. Your blog post can become your portfolio, right? Because your blog post helps me understand the breadth and the depth of your passion and your expertise. I don't know if I'm selling anybody on this blog thing, but I do think it's an excellent way for us to brag about and showcase our breadth and our depth and our passion and our expertise. Okay. That's the tangent of substantiating yourself. Let me jump over to the income streams. Back in 2018, in October, I'm sitting across the desk from the executive who's apologetically laying me off. And my thought was, I don't care. Like, I wish I could finish this program. I wish I could roll it out. I wish that we could roll it out to tens of thousands of customers, that it could bring in tens of millions of dollars. I could be the vice president over this. I could have a team. We could touch millions of people. That's what my wish was. That's why I signed on. I wanted that bigger picture. But financially, I didn't care. It didn't hurt. That was a Thursday, actually. Wednesday, the day before, I got on the phone with Pluralsight after 2.5 years of not doing courses. And this was a, hey, Jason, are you ready to do your next course? And I was like, absolutely. So Wednesday, I turned on an old revenue stream. Thursday, I got notice that my job was going away. Friday, I was on a call with somebody who wanted to get into a partnership with Jibberjobber, which could have meant a very lucrative another revenue stream. I didn't care about losing my job because I had other stuff. Back in 2006, when I started Jibberjobber, my goal, my dream was still to have an executive level position in some big company like Ford or whatever. I wanted to be in a huge company, huge role, beautiful benefits, great retirement, and have an awesome life. That's what I thought I wanted back then. So I started Jibberjobber in 06, and I thought, if I could just make $100 a month, just $100 a month from Jibberjobber, the next time I get laid off, whoever lays me off cannot take away all of my income. They can take away a lot of it, but I'll at least have $100 a month that they can't touch. And how beautiful it was that 12 years later, yeah, it was 12 years later because that was 2018. 12 years later, I get laid off and they couldn't impact my lifestyle. It was awesome. So what does developing multiple income streams mean for you? I actually have my tripod is a bunch of books, and then I have this robot that I got speaking in Belgium, and then I got my camera on top of it. The bottom book is Robert Allen's Multiple Streams of Income book. I read this December of 2005. Weeks before I was getting laid off. I was at home. I was not home, but I was visiting my parents over Christmas, and I pulled it out of my mom's bookshelf and I read about half of it, and it got a little boring after a while. So I don't say that I recommend the book, although if you're interested, definitely start reading some of these types of books. But I recommend the title. I tell people, write down multiple streams of income and put it on your monitor. So the question that everybody asks about stuff like this is, when is the best time to plant a tree? You've all heard this. When is the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. Well, that didn't happen. When is the next best time? Today. So my invitation to you is to start thinking about what you can do to develop multiple streams of income. I'm not talking about repositories or wells of, you know, having money in the bank. That's what Dave Ramsey calls emergency fund stuff, right? I'm talking about streams that come in, continually generating income. So when I got laid off, I had my Pluralsight royalties, which grew in multiples since I stopped doing work with Pluralsight back in, I think, around 2015. So in 2015, I stopped doing courses, and my royalties were growing in multiples. Talk about passive income, right? A few years ago, before I got this job in 2018, my wife's an only child, and we moved in with her parents. We were both going to sell our houses, buy a house together, and then live in that house. And we're in that house today. But they sold their house right away. Guess what? We couldn't sell our house. And we wanted to, we really wanted to, but we couldn't. But we've rented it. And we've never not had a renter in from the moment we left. We're going on 4 years now. I've always wanted to be a landlord, but I didn't know how to get into real estate. I didn't have money to buy another home or a rental home. But we now have that rental home when I got laid off. And the house that we live in now, it's a really weird house, but it has 2 mother-in-law suites. So my in-laws live in one, and we rent the other one out. That's another income stream, right? And so I'm sitting there getting this job income, and I recognize and realize, I finally realized this awesome epiphany that my job was only an income stream. That's what it was. It wasn't my identity. It wasn't my master. It wasn't my destiny for the rest of my life, because getting laid off once is going to teach you that lesson, right? It was simply an income stream. And for most people, the job is your only income stream, or it's your main income stream, but it doesn't have to be that way. And I will tell you right now, the beauty and the peace of having your job go down as far as the percentage of revenue that it provides you, it goes down because your other revenue streams pick up is amazing. Can you imagine going to work one day and saying, you know what? I choose to be here. I want to be here. I don't have to be here. I could walk out right now and it would be okay. That is the power of multiple streams of income. Whether you do this through side gigs, whether you do it through consulting, whether you sell Aunt Bessie's famous salsa, whether you do it through rentals. There's a podcast that my son turned me on to. It's called Bigger Pockets. Bigger Pockets. Go look them up. They are fascinating. It's 2 or 3 guys that interview multiple real estate investors. And these are people, they're across the board. There are people who are just starting out. There are people who have apartment complexes. There are people who are investing in self-storage. Like, there's a whole bunch of different ways to make money. and they interview them, and they're long. It's like an hour and a half long. So this is like, you know, for long drives or whatever. But these are fascinating stories of people from all walks of life who have figured out how to develop new income streams through flipping houses, which is actually still a thing, or through renting or whatever it is, right? I don't know what your income streams are going to be, but I invite you, I beg you, I don't even know who you are, but I beg you to seriously figure out how you can develop multiple income streams. There's a lot of power in that. Okay, just real quick, I'll talk about three ideas on income streams. We're going to wrap up here pretty soon. If you have any questions, I'm more than happy to stay and answer questions. Also, my email address is jason@jibberjobber.com. Remember, I'm more than happy to give you, if I have one, a 30-day pass on Pluralsight. Also, Pluralsight's doing a 33% off right now, so it's $200 for a year, and you'll find my courses there, and Joe has courses there. Whatever you're into, I bet with the technology, you'll be able to find something on. If you're interested in becoming a Pluralsight author and creating an income stream, let me know. I'd love to talk about it. I want to talk about three things that I learned when I started Jibber Jobber. So I was at a job club, and there was this guy who started his own business when I started my own business. I started a products business. He started a consulting or a services business. Guess who started making money right away? He was making bank. He was making a ton of money, doing very well, was not working the 8 or 10 hours that he used to work, because he's now billing $200-300 an hour, right? And he had a steady line of customers, and he did very, very well right away. I, on the other hand, drained my entire 401k, and I borrowed money that I still haven't paid back to my dad and my father-in-law, and they both wrote it off as soon as they gave me the money. They knew, they just mentally thought, we're never going to see this money again. But I learned a big difference between products and services. And if I were to go back today, I would probably try and do 1 or 2 hours of consulting a day, so 5 or 10 hours a week, and generate revenue through services as opposed to doing a complete product play. My goal was to develop a product that Monster or Indeed or some other company would have acquired, right? And I don't think that's a bad goal. I don't think that's a bad idea, but the strategy and the needs and the funding and all that stuff was very different than if I were to have gone into a services business. And so I learned a lot of stuff, but I definitely learned the difference between products and services. The third thing that I wanted to talk about was pricing. Most entrepreneurs, new entrepreneurs, don't understand how to price typically their services. When you're consulting, a lot of times what you do is you say something like, okay, I make $100,000 a year, and if you divide that out by 2080, then I make about $50 an hour. So I'm going to go consult at this company for $50 an hour. And that's wrong. That's bad thinking. First of all, if you've never been involved in finance or payroll, you might not understand that there's a thing called a loaded burden or a loaded rate or a burden, which is a percentage of how much your salary is. You add this percentage to account for insurance and whatever other costs are that a company has to keep you on staff as an employee, okay? So if you think you're making $50 an hour, that company's charging is actually paying maybe $60 an hour to have you on staff. That's still, in my opinion, flawed thinking on how to price yourself out, okay? Have you ever heard of the story about the guy who, the mechanic who went in to fix something like an airplane engine or something, And he went in and he's like, oh, well, here's your problem. And there was this different screw or something that had to be redone. And it took 5 minutes to find and replace and fix and done. And he gave a bill for $5,000. And the guy's like, well, that screw didn't cost $5,000. And the guy was like, yeah, but my knowledge and my expertise, knowing where the problem was and what the solution was, that's what cost you $5,000. And the reality is, even that isn't how we should be billing, okay? The way that we need to price our services is based on the value that we're bringing to the organization. So many times I talk to service-based entrepreneurs who underprice, let me rephrase that, they undervalue what they're bringing to their clients. If you're going out there charging the hourly rate that you make at your job, you're probably underpricing by 2 or 3 or 4 times what you should, not what you could, but what you should be pricing. I remember when my brother was an attorney, he was probably making 30 or 40 bucks an hour, and they were easily billing him out at 300 or 400, 10 times what they were paying him. Okay, I want you as an entrepreneur, side hustle, your income streams, if you're doing service-based stuff, think about the value that you're bringing to your customer, not what you think your rate should be. All right, with that, I am done. We have about 12 minutes. And Daniel, thank you. You found the substantiate yourself. That was in 2006. It's in the chat, you guys. December of 2006. Anyway, that was really cool. That was a really cool concept. If anybody has any questions, I'm more than happy to stay, or if you want to switch it over to what you normally do and how you normally end, I'm happy to stay for that also. But I'm going to be quiet here until somebody says something.
Yeah, Jason, I have a question. So I've been at the same company now for about 10 years, and I've certainly had those moments where I've thought, okay, maybe now is the time to go do something else in a different company. I know that's not the same as laying off or firing, but do you have any advice as far as that goes? Because I feel like I am rather tied to my income at this point from this company.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. A lot of people are. Well, I mean, the first piece of advice that I'll give to everybody, and I'm sure you already know this, is you don't jump until you know what you're jumping into, right? And so if you're in a comfortable space where you have time and you have the luxury, right, because you have income coming in right now, I would turn on your networking. I would seriously turn on your networking, figure out how you want to be perceived as you network. This is a great opportunity for you to go 1 or 2 levels up if that's what you're interested in. Some people want to, some people don't want to go into management. But it's a great time for you to say, okay, you know what do I want out of a career? Like, where do I want to be? Where am I going to be happier? Is it going to be in a small high-tech funded startup that's exciting? Is it going to be in a bigger, like a Microsoft, a bigger, more bureaucratic, but the benefits and the lifestyle is a lot more calm? Maybe. I'm not saying that Microsoft's necessarily calm. I know some departments can be and some aren't. But I think it's a great opportunity in your situation to really be introspective and think, what do I want? Where do I want to be? What do I want to be doing? What kind of people do I want to work with? And then if you can start figuring out what those targets are, those ideals are, then work backwards from there on how to network into that. Who are the people, profession and industry and geography, who are the people that I should start developing relationships with? And as I communicate with them, what do I want them to know about me? Like, let's say for example, you're a senior level developer and you want to go into the CIO or CTO level or run a dev shop or something like that. You need to make sure that how you're communicating is in line with that forward vision of where you want to end up, right? So anyways, those are some of my thoughts. I think it's a really fun place to be. It's a lot more fun than being laid off and desperately looking. But I'll tell you what, man, you know, back in the olden days, back in the 1900s, talk like this was less common. But right now it's like, you know what, your company is lucky that you've been around for 10 years. They're lucky that they haven't had to replace you. It's unusual for people to be around that long. I would keep all your options open, and as you leave, make sure you don't burn any bridges, because you never know where people from your organization are going to end up. They might be your future boss again, or colleagues might be your future boss. They might bring you into a company, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of the stuff that I talked about today with networking and branding apply for side gigs. They apply for this type of situation. It's just principle-based stuff that I haven't been able to get away from since I started talking about it. Does that help?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Good luck to you. It sounds like a lot of fun. All right. Anybody else have any questions? Joe stayed on, so that's good.
Was there an expectation that I wouldn't?
Well, you never know. You never know. I tell people when I speak, I say, if you have to leave early, stomp out. So make a scene, make it look like I've offended you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I want to add one thing. First of all, Jason, one of the things I really like about GlugNet is we're not just .NET developers in the sense that, you know, we talk about code every month. You know, we do try to vary our talks enough that, you know, there's something for everybody. So this was very different than our normal talk, but I really appreciate it, and I think that it was very well received, and I'm definitely going to recommend the YouTube video to several of my friends who unfortunately couldn't make it tonight.
Great.
But also, you know, we talked about networking, and you know, one of the thoughts in my mind as you were talking about that was that, you know, I love going to conferences. This year's not a good year for that, but, you know, going to places like CodeMesh and, you know, used to be DevLink, and there's, you know, various regional conferences. Grand Rapids has one every year. And the feeling of walking into that room, and maybe I don't know everybody, but I know a lot of those folks because I've been to 2 or 3 or 4 of those, and just the chance to say hi again. It was almost like a reunion, you know. It's a reunion with these folks I haven't seen in a year, and I get a chance to see my friends again. And that's why I think I enjoy going to conferences more for that than whether I'm going to really hear an hour's worth of this new technology.
Yeah, I agree.
And I know some people who, like, they'll go to a conference and they'll spend the whole day in the hallway. They won't even go into a single session. Now, I'm not that bad. I definitely do want to learn some new things, but
yeah.
So, you know, what comes to my mind when we think about networking is when I feel like I'm meeting a friend I haven't seen in a while, that's when I'm networking right.
Yeah, yeah, love it. It's fun. I remember this one guy, he was out of work for a while, and he had 4 or 5 lunches every day. And his wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I remember him telling me one day, he said, "I love this stuff. It's so fun. I don't want to get a job because this is fun." I saw Jasmine unmute a couple of times. Jasmine, do you have a question?
Yeah. It's Jasmine. I struggle with that a lot. But back to consulting. How you know, if a person finds themselves in a situation where they understand a concept or a topic, but they may not be all that confident in what their background is to say, like, hey, I know how to fix this problem. How do you go from that that lack of confidence to actually getting to a place to where you say, hey, I'm going to start this business, and this is what I have to offer?
Yeah, thank you. So I'll give you 2 thoughts right off the top of my head. The first one is find a mentor. Find a mentor who is doing consulting. There are so many things to learn because consulting is not, I don't think it's very scripted, right? There's always different challenges or issues, whether that has to do with the operational side of being a a consultant with billing and chasing money and working with your prospects and speccing stuff out, or the actual completing and delivering and stuff like that. You're way different than having a day job, right? A day job, you can either finish or not finish and come back the next day. Whereas as a consultant, there's like this full expectation to meet your statement of work and then be done and submit an invoice and then what, right? So I would definitely find a mentor or a few mentors who are doing that you can have these conversations with and say, hey, here's where I'm at. Here's a situation. I don't quite know how to handle this. Can you walk me through this, right? And so I think that mentor relationship is going to, or those multiple mentor relationships are going to help you overcome imposter syndrome, because part of it really is, I don't know how to do this and I need someone to hold my hand through this process. But the other part is, I bet you do know how to do it, or you could figure it out, but you just need someone to say, you're on the right track. It's okay, and I give you permission to do this. People ask me, like, how'd you write your first book? How'd you do Pluralsight, your first Pluralsight course? How did you start Jibberjobber? Like, how'd you do all these things? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I had to figure it out with Google, and I talked to people, right? So there's a healthy mix between you're just going to jump in with both feet and do it, and find people who can help guide you through whatever parts of that process you need guidance through. The other thing that I was going to say is, sometimes you just got to jump, right? Like, you're going to make mistakes. I remember the first website that I made and I charged somebody for, it was horrible. They didn't know that. All the stuff on the back end that they never saw, it's embarrassing for me to now even think about what I did and how I did it. I charged $400 for that, which was probably low, but it was my first one. But I learned from that one. And the next time I went into a situation, I could take the stuff I learned, and every time I got better and better and better. So 2 things: find a mentor and just start. Just start something and be okay to make some mistakes, but recognize that imposter syndrome is probably a lot worse than the reality of whether you are or are not good. That didn't come out right. Whether you are good or not.
Thanks, Jason. I think that is a big thing. The imposter syndrome is definitely something that I find myself working through, and it's a concept as I continue to read and put more great things into my mind that I keep running into. So I definitely appreciate that advice.
Yeah, my pleasure. Good luck to you.
Thanks.
So let me add.
Go ahead, Joe.
This is Joe. Let me just add a comment there. I don't really necessarily see imposter syndrome as a negative. It can be a positive, right? It's positive energy. It motivates you and drives you to be better, right? So I know a lot of people really stress over imposter syndrome, and I think we all experience it to some degree. But it's not a negative. I mean, I really believe that. And as you go through your career, I've been in this business for a couple decades now, or more than a couple. And if you're willing to try new things, and you have to be in this industry, technology, there'll be times when it doesn't work out, and that's okay. It's not because your imposter syndrome finally came true. It's just because, hey, you got to stick your neck out, and most of the time it'll work, and sometimes it won't, and that's okay. And I think you have to understand that.
Yeah, I had imposter syndrome at that job in 2018, the one that I was perfect for, and it was weird, man. It was a total head game. It was just weird. But when I realized, because I drive home and I'm not like, what's going on? This is not who I am. But when I realized it was a head game, then it was easier to kind of work my way through.
Right.
Okay, any more questions?
Can I ask you a weird one, Jason?
Those are the ones I like.
Okay. How do you I guess I don't, like, I'm an introvert, but I don't really like to form, like, I don't know, deep personal relationships with people. So how would you go about networking if you are a person like that, where you're not really interested in forming a lot of relationships? Because
Yeah.
everyone says it's important.
Right, right. And it's like, if you don't do that, then you're not going to have success in your career. You know, I definitely recommend that you check out the 2 books that I mentioned, The Brag and Never Eat Alone. And just, I want to give you permission to just take your time and do it at your pace. You are not out, and you don't, and when I say you, I'm not talking about just you, I'm talking about just everybody in, I'm talking about professional relationships. I'm not saying that we have to be best friends and that we have to, hang out together after work and all that stuff. I have a lot of professional relationships that I would like to meet some of these people and maybe see if there could be a personal relationship. But in general, I'm okay to identify and define what some professional relationship brand boundaries, not brand, but relationship boundaries can be, and be okay that we're not going to be BFFs, right? And so I think I want to give you permission to just go slow, go at your own pace, and recognize that having a few touch points professionally with somebody is good enough. You don't have to go really, really deep. And when I talked about the 1-star and the 5-star relationships, how I'm tracking the strength of the relationship, 5-star does not mean that we have a deep personal relationship, but it could mean that I have a strong professional relationship. And basically the way I gauge that is, can I call you up and you'll take my call? That's really what it is. Am I on your radar enough that you care about and you're open to fielding my call? That's what I'm looking for. So, all right, I think we're there, guys. We're past top of the hour.
Yes, thank you, Jason. That was wonderful. So the link
My
to the
pleasure.
feedback survey has been put in the chat window. I'll also email that out. That will be open for 24 hours. So please make sure to give your feedback. And then Jason, once I get that together, I will aggregate that and get you a summary of the results.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, I want to second that. Thank you very much. It was a very, very interesting conversation. And I think as techies, we focus so much on the technology, but not enough on our career. And so this has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. I appreciate that. Thanks for the invitation. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Good luck to each of you. My email is jason@jibberdrobber.com. Feel free to hit me up with questions.
Okay, have a good one. Appreciate it very much.
Thank you, Jason.
Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye.